All right, we're going to talk about firefighter rehabilitation, the importance of it, and the pre-rehab, and what to do on an emergency scene. All right, so our learning objectives: describe the need for and function of firefighter rehabilitation, describe the factors that necessitate the setting up of a rehabilitation station, and describe the process of rehabilitation in each individual's role. All right, so we know as a firefighter it is physically and mentally demanding, and we need to consider that before and during any type of emergency incident where we could be exerting a lot of energy or fatigue, being on a scene for a long duration of time. And then some other considerations is the erratic schedule, so not always being consistent, being up all night, may run calls during the day and then into the night. Quality of performance can be life and death, so once that fatigue sets in, your judgment can start being altered, so just realizing that in your pre-rehab and making sure that you are in the best situation you can be in going onto a call. And then be ready to respond anytime and anywhere. All right, so we talked about a little bit on the pre-rehabilitation importance. All right, so firefighters must be ready to respond at any time. All right, so this is going to go back into, and we're going to talk more about it later in the lecture, but what are you doing to be ready for those calls? When you come into a shift at 7 a.m., you may go straight onto a fire scene, and so you didn't have time at the station to necessarily get ready. So what did you do prior to getting to your shift? All right, so firefighters must be ready to respond at any time. They must ensure their bodies are always prepared for the next call. And pre-rehabilitation, maintaining hydration, nutrition, rest, and clothing appropriate for the weather. And again, we're going to hit each of these topics throughout the lecture. All right, so emergency incident rehabilitation. Firefighters require relief from extreme environmental conditions. All right, so we have rest and recovery. So during that call, you're going to have your rest in between, maybe when you used up a bottle and now you're going to sit, and what it means to actually rest during that rehab time. Cooling and rewarming. We'll talk about the differences of active and passive rehydration, how to properly rehydrate instead of what type of drinks to drink, and then also calorie and electrolyte replacement, medical monitoring, and then possible treatment by EMS. All right, so what is rehabilitate? Restore someone or something to a condition of health or a state of useful and constructive activity. So essentially just bringing you back to a point to where you can do your job. All right, so the goal is to take time to recharge your body's batteries so you can continue to be a productive member of the team. All right, so again, it's just getting you back to where you can go back into the structure or help salvage an overhaul or continue a rescue operation. Just whatever the scenario is, the rehab is that time for you to kind of reset, get back to where you can be an effective member of the team. All right. It enables firefighters to perform more safely and effectively. Again, once you start, fatigue sets in, dehydration sets in. We'll talk more about this later, but it starts altering that mental status and altering how you respond to certain situations. All right, so PPE can be one of the, it's a great tool that we have and a great protective barrier that we have against the environments that we work in, right? It protects us from fire, from heat, certain chemicals. We don't breathe in the smoke, all right? But it also works against us when we're talking about the effects it has on our bodies. And so the PPE we wear holds in heat, which causes obviously more sweating. And then once that body heat can't be released, all right, so your body just keeps heating up. and then that can work against you in the heat and also work against you when it's cold, right? And we'll talk more about the cooling and the warming, but obviously as in hotter weather, you are losing more sweat, and then you are having to look at, all right, how much did you prepare for that call? Did you drink enough electrolytes, sodium, water? And now you're losing, can be up to a quart per hour depending on the call itself, and the heat and the humidity. And then on the other side of that, if it's cold and you're sweating inside your gear, and as you take the gear off, all right, now you have to be worried about hypothermia and other sorts of things. And then you add the weight of the gear, can be roughly up to 40 pounds or more. So now you're adding that extra stress on your body along with everything else. So again, it's a great tool. It's necessary for what we do, but we have to consider those factors when we are in prehabilitation. All right, so leading into that from the PPE and how much water you can lose, we'll talk a little bit about dehydration. So when the body's fluid losses are greater than the fluid intake, so it can lead to electrolyte imbalance, shock. There's different types of shock, and then it could lead to death if the proper signs were not noticed early on. So again, with the heat that we work in, especially here in the South, plus the PPE we wear, dehydration is a major factor that we need to be considered while on scene. It can go unnoticed until late signs set in because other stress factors are going on, and when you're on the call, you might be worried about helping these guys finish salvage and overhaul, or maybe trying to get through one more bottle, and you start pushing those signs and symptoms to the side until it's a little too late. A few things: dehydration, it can reduce strength, endurance, and mental judgment. So again, this is where the prehabilitation is a major factor. Come in to work ready. You can't come in and drink a bunch of water and think you're going to be good. It's the day before, 2 days before. You have to be leading up to those situations to be ready. All right, so this is a little table here that just explains some of the signs and symptoms of dehydration in coordination with the percentage of body weight loss. So 1%, just an increased thirst. 2%, loss of appetite, dry skin, dark urine. Some of these symptoms we've probably all seen at a point in our life, whether it's sports, just working out in the yard during the summer. But these things have to be noticed on a fire scene or in a scenario where these symptoms could lead to heat exhaustion, or even worse, like a heat stroke. All right, so along with water and fluids, we have to be worried about energy consumption. So what foods are we eating to prepare our bodies for these scenarios? So we know all the junk food out there with sugars and high fat intake and all that. Some of those are good, but we have to be cognizant of what we're eating and what are we putting into our bodies to fuel during those situations. All right, so our body burns carbohydrates and fats, so we need those, but we need the right kinds. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then caloric requirements differ from person to person. So it might be, if you have somebody who's 5'7", 5'8", and then you have somebody who's 6'3", there's going to be a different requirement for those individuals, obviously within how they're built, what's their daily activity look like, but you don't need to match the person next to you just because y'all do the same job. Y'all might have different requirements and what you need on a day-to-day basis. And then what we're looking for good caloric intake is your lean proteins, complex carbs, fruits and vegetables. So you can obviously look those up. Lean proteins is going to be anything, fish, chicken, lean red meats, complex carbs. You're looking at sweet potatoes, some of your more like grain rices, brown rice, and then of course your fruits and vegetables. Tolerance for stress can vary from person to person. All right, so age can play a factor, physical and mental condition. Right, everybody's got kind of a different past. So if you've done construction out in the heat your whole life, you may have a higher tolerance to some of the stresses of the heat and that environment. If you've been sitting in an office, it may be a little more difficult, and your body may not react quite the same to that stress on a call at this point. So if you're a runner and your heart rate is used to be in, somewhere in the high 40s, low 50s, you may have a little bit better tolerance to the stress, and your heart rate may stay lower on a call because of that. So everyone's going to be a little different here, and that's why training is so important, because training gets those stress levels to kind of a normal state, where when you're on a scene, it's not such a dramatic difference that your body's experiencing. So even the most impressive conditioning will not keep a firefighter from becoming exhausted under physically stressful situations. All right, so when is rehabilitation needed? All right, so there's no set time frame of when you need to go rehab. It can be, again, it can differ from person to person. So there's a few rules of thumb and guidelines out there that kind of help, because again, it's going to be a stressful situation. There's going to be a lot going on. It might not be something you necessarily think about until it's too late, until you're experiencing some of those signs and symptoms. All right, so perform self-rehabilitation for a minimum of 20 minutes following the depletion of one SCBA cylinder, after 40 minutes of intense work with SCBA, or whenever a full encapsulating suit is worn. All right, so again, these are not set standards. Like, this is not what you have to do. It can differ. Some people might not make it through an entire SCBA bottle before they have to go out and rehab. All right, some people may change out an SCBA bottle and be completely fine. You have to know yourself. You have to know what your prehabilitation looked like. What's your training been looking like? What are your signs and symptoms? But again, with everything going on, it might be a good rule of thumb. Just say, I went through one SCBA bottle, do your rehab, get your rest, reset. That can depend on manning, what's going on that specific call. A lot of factors contribute, but might be something just you would want to go back to your departments and kind of see how they do things. Follow rehabilitation guidelines established by your department. Ensure members are fit to return to duty following rehabilitation. Larger incidents may require a person to serve as a time recorder. All right, so it's not necessary to do all the components of a rehab at every call. So each call can be a little different. If you have a small shed fire in the backyard, you're probably not going to have too many rehab needs. All right, it just depends. If you have a huge high rise, that's when you're going to need all those rehab efforts and look at the different standards that you're meeting to get everyone back, get their full rest, get their nutrition up, rehydration. Significant emergency incidents require full-scale rehabilitation efforts. All right, so we're going to go through some of the different environments and what the rehab may look like for those. So a structure fire, you may need some more extended on-scene time. Depending on the structure, how big is the structure, how much is involved, how many people do you have on scene. There's a lot of different factors that go into this, and hopefully your IC is going to make that determination. It is easy for firefighters to work beyond their limits. So that, again, going back to, in a stressful situation, you're going to want to be doing everything you can to help and move past whatever signs and symptoms you're feeling at that time. but you have to be able to recognize and keep yourself healthy, because if you go down, you're adding stress to the situation. Part of the purpose of rehab is to rest and refuel for these extended operations. So again, you don't want to just go out and exhaust everything you have in the first 20 or 30 minutes and then now you're down for the call. You want to take it in strides. It says right there, it can seem like a sprint there at first when you get on scene, but overall it's a marathon. You're trying to finish and make sure that everything gets accomplished. So you have to take care of yourself during that time. So again, talking about high-rise fires, obviously if you think about a structure fire and all the stresses, now you've just added a few different elements of how many stories are you having to climb. You know, you're carrying all the equipment, all your gear. Now you're going to be that much more fatigued and depleted before you even really get to potentially getting to the fire. All right, so you may have it broken up into different companies, and that way you're helping kind of make that cycle through rehab and taking care of yourself and your people. And so just those considerations are what you would like to know, and maybe again going back to your department, and if you have some buildings in your area that you think would be a concern or fit into this scenario, maybe talk to them and see kind of how they do things. And it says right there, rehabilitation area is usually located 2 or 3 floors below the level of the fire. Wildland fires, this can also vary. You can have small, just kind of brush fires to large scale, widespread wildland fires. So this, again, is going to dictate kind of how you do your rehab. It can be, again, spread out, and you may have different rest areas all over the place, or it may be centralized, and then you may not even have the need for one. So again, it's just going to depend on your situation, and but overall the efforts are the same. You're still looking to get your rest, look for proper rehydration. If it's going to be a long term, obviously your intake of food is going to be, you're not looking for snacks, you're looking for more meals, more sustainable energy, and then also what climate are you in, so paying attention to your active and cooling, warming, or active or passive cooling or warming. So training exercises can be just as dangerous. I think sometimes people get relaxed because they think it's training, but you have all the same factors that you could have on scene, just you planned them, right? So you go and you have your full PPE on. It could be the heat of the summer and you're doing a live fire training exercise, or doing some drills out back. And sometimes those can be the most dangerous because you don't think it's that much, because you're going out there and you're doing a circuit, or maybe you're used to working out, but that heat just comes in that much faster because you're in full gear, and maybe you haven't gotten out there and done it much. So training is just as important as anything else. Make sure that you are prepared to go out there, that you've taken in the proper hydration, food. All right. Pay attention to other people around you. If you're the one helping plan these events, have that safety person out there looking, making sure that people are not ignoring any of their signs and symptoms. So we often think about just going to a fire scene, and that's your rehab, but there's so many other scenes that we could experience the need for a rehab in, and that hazardous materials is big because of the fully encapsulating suits. Again, when you get inside one of those suits, it doesn't take long to realize that there is no heat being released, and so it's just your heat rotating through and then just increasing your sweat and your dehydration. And then the outside temperature also has a huge factor on this as well, because if it's hot and humid, that is only going to increase the temperature inside of the suit, and then increase your body temperature. So being aware of what's going on in the environment around you, and then plus what you're having to do. So potentially strenuous conditions for extended periods of time. The staging area may be from the hazardous materials. So just thinking about keeping it as far as you can to keep that stressful situation away, to get the proper rest. These can be long-winded situations just because of all the complexity of hazardous materials and other entities that may have to be involved. So it could be a pretty long-term situation. All right, so how does rehabilitation work? The 7 parts of rehab. All right, so relief from climatic conditions, rest and recovery, passive or active cooling or warming, rehydration and calorie replacement, medical monitoring, member accountability, release, and reassignment. All right, we're going to break down each one of these. So before you even get to a rehab area, y'all should have already talked about this in the PPE chapter, but you want to reduce any contaminants that you can before you go into an area, right? So you don't want to take all the hazardous contaminants with you into where you're going to be resting and trying to get yourself back ready to go. So we're going to do that field reduction of contaminants. All right, so the firefighter's proximity to the fire scene, the temperature of the rehabilitation area, the amount of time needed at the rehabilitation area. All PPE exposed to hazardous conditions should be removed and cleaned. All right, so field reduction of contaminants begins while the firefighter is still wearing the PPE. Again, we talked about spraying them down with water. If you can have a hose, clean any exposed skin. If you take any of your PPE off, do it before entering PPE and clean it. Store only in the proper PPE storage area to avoid continued exposure to carcinogens. All right, so now that we're in the rehab area, relief from climatic conditions. All right, so what is our environment? Is it hot and humid? Is it cold? All that plays a factor into where is the rehab going to be set up? Is it going to be indoors or outdoors? If it's here in Mississippi, if it's spring and it feels good outside, there's no issues with it being outside. If it's winter and it's 20 degrees and you have just gone inside, you've been fighting the fire, you come out and you're going to take your PPE off and you're soaking wet, that's going to be a problem. That's not going to be a good rehab for you and could cause further harm, right? So things to consider with that. Do you have any extra clothes with you? Did you bring socks, shirt? Do you carry that with you on the truck? Because those are those times where you could change your shirt, change your socks, and increase decrease the risk of any harm from the cold weather. All right, so rehabilitation may be set up nearby a building or transportation services may be provided. All right, so if there's nothing available nearby, they may set up a kind of a shuttle for people to go to and from the rehab to the scene. Remove PPE when entering rehabilitation area to help your body warm up or cool down. All right, change your clothing if it's wet right there. When temperature is very hot or humid, the need for rehabilitation centers is increased. All right, so some of the conditions talked about a little bit earlier. So heat-related conditions. Heat stress can lead to serious short or long-term medical situations. So heat rash, obviously it's just going to kind of be probably a small area where it's kind of, has that itchy feel to it, maybe just kind of red. Heat cramps, so you'll start feeling muscle spasms and some of your muscles could start to tighten up. It can be very painful. A lot of times this is going to happen in your legs, maybe in your abdomen. Heat exhaustion. All right, so it's a mild form of shock, but it's pretty much where your body's unable to adequately cool itself. It's getting to a point leading into heat stroke where your body has no longer been able, or your body is no longer able to cool itself down. All right, and so that's where in a minute when we talk about passive and active cooling, this will come into a major role on how to address each of these situations. But the biggest thing here is recognizing that these are happening. All right, and don't let it build up to the next level. So on the opposite side of that, we have cold-related conditions. All right, so of course, being here from Mississippi, we don't really think about these as much, but they are still something to be concerned about. So again, we can be wet from firefighting, whether that's just sweat that we've accumulated underneath our PPE, obviously spraying water, and any other type of situation that may cause us to have that, to be wet on scene. So things we have to worry about here is hypothermia. All right, so our body's not warming itself, it's kind of dropping below that 95 degrees. And then frostbite is where it's gotten to the point of tearing down the tissues, and that's just from an overexposure, prolonged cold exposure. All right, so once we get to the rehab area, rest and recovery is what we're worried about, right? So we need to rest, and that should be kind of disengaging or separating yourself from a stressful activity. All right, again, removing your PPE. Each area could be different. It could be set up for long-term recovery and rest. Again, depending on those situations, maybe those hazmat, or if you have a rescue scenario that's been going on for a while, it could be equipped with cots and other things. And then maybe a smaller rehab area is just some snacks, drinks, and a few chairs just to sit. So that passive or active cooling, all right, so now you've recognized maybe you kind of have some of that heat exhaustion going. What are you going to do to help mitigate those? All right, so if you're overheated, your passive cooling is removing that PPE, letting that heat release, and then kind of being in a cooler environment. Again, depending on where your rehab set up. If your rehab is set up in August outside, this is not going to be a passive cooling. So you'd have to change your environment there to be sure that you are bringing that body temperature down. All right, active cooling is required when passive is not adequate. All right, so this is when we get misting fans, wet towels, using cold water. That's when we are actively changing the circumstances to cool down the body temperature. All right, so on the other side, if we're doing warm, passive or active warming, it's the same thing. Passive is getting them out of the cold to restore that normal temperature. All right, and then active, we're looking for warming blankets, heated and humidified oxygen, warmed IV fluids. All right, anything we can apply to bring that temperature back up and kind of, again, bring that normal temperature to us. All right, so rehydration, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the chapter, but we have to make sure that we're using the proper sources for rehydration. All right, so because it says right there, 2% loss in body weight and can impair body temperature regulation. So perspiration also causes electrolyte loss. All right, so if we start drinking, so we've lost electrolytes, we've lost 2 quarts of water, and if we try to replenish that with cola, coffee, tea, it's actually, those serve as a diuretic, so then you're causing more fluid to leave. All right, so we're acting against ourselves at that point. So we have to pay attention. Are we drinking water? This is the time where Gatorades and Powerades and all the sports with electrolytes, these drinks are going to come in to play to restore the electrolytes and sodium that you've lost. All right, so you want to make sure that you're hydrating plenty of those fluids during that time. And then you also want to make sure that you're hydrating at the proper amount. So you don't want to drink a whole bunch of water, a whole bunch of Gatorade. That tends to make your stomach bloated. You could potentially feel nauseous and feel kind of uneasy as you go back into the scenario, and it could work against you there. So, and then also trying to drink room temperature more than really cold can also have a better effect on you. So the calorie replacement, again, what are we eating to gain that energy? All right, so intense physical work burns many calories. Glucose is needed to burn fat and release energy. Obviously, with glucose or sugars, blood sugar, it can be too high, it can be too low. If it's too high, we tend to feel sluggish and kind of that lethargic kind of, you know, after you eat lunch and you come back to the classroom and you just feel like you want to take a nap, right? We've probably spiked those insulin levels and that glucose is shot up. All right, if it's too low, we're going to feel weak, maybe a little disoriented. All right, carbohydrates are converted to glucose, so the carbohydrates are needed in these situations. They give you that energy, but again, going back to what type of carbohydrates we eat, the simple or complex, make a difference in how it converts that glucose, whether it spikes it and you can have that too high and then you crash, or if it kind of sustains, right? Proteins are needed to grow and repair tissues. All right, so maybe your proteins aren't maybe necessarily as vital in that on the emergency scene, but if it's extended out, it's a great thing to have to prolong that energy and to fuel your body and your muscles as you're working. All right, fats are essential for life, energy, insulating and protecting organs. All right, so again, good fats is what we're looking for here, and eating that right intake will help sustain that energy throughout the call. All right, so again, sugar, body quickly absorbs and turns into fuel. Simple sugars stimulate production of insulin, reducing blood glucose levels, resulting in lower energy. All right, so you hit that spike, but it's going to crash. So that's why you have to be careful with some of those calories that you can take in during rehab. Short duration incidents, low sugar, high protein sports bars can be useful. And again, that mainly just because those are calorie dense and they are quick and easy, right? So you're not getting everything you need out of it, but for what it is, it can get you through the short duration. Extended, looking for more of a complete meal with your carbs, proteins, fats, all right? Getting all the nutrients you can to kind of work together to prolong that energy. And of course, the proper balance of all are an ideal situation, and that's going to again depend on you as an individual. How much do you normally take in? What's your daily activity look like? And you know, the best thing to do is figure this out well before you're on a fire scene, and you can kind of, you know, your body, what's it respond to? Medical monitoring, important during rehabilitation and to identify dangerous health problems. So obviously your normal vital signs, heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, temperature, oxygen in the bloodstream, carbon monoxide assessment. So yeah, just checking over your basic vitals, maybe you don't know your blood pressure is high or your heart rate's through the roof. And so just a quick medical monitoring, make sure everything checks out, and ensuring the safety for everyone. If vital signs are abnormal upon entering, re-examine before returning to firefighting. So again, as soon as you get into a rehab area, your heart rate probably is going to be really high. So assess it before going back in, and that can kind of tell you if you go back into it with a high heart rate, that could be alarming. All right, so anything that's abnormal, again, need to be aware of and bring it to someone's attention. Chest pain, weakness, dizziness, shortness of breath, headache, cramps, mental status changes. All right, so these are going to be important. You may feel like you can push through it and keep working, but this could be the safety of someone else or yourself, right? You don't want to harm the guy next to you because you wanted to push through, you're just a little dizzy, but really you were dehydrated and you fell out. So member accountability, maintain crew integrity during rehabilitation. Crew members should be released to and released from rehabilitation together. Accountability on the fire ground is easier to control. So this is why we take it so important out here when we talk about your tags and accountability. You need to know where your people are. The IC needs to know where their people are. So it's just the importance continues on, and it doesn't change on the fire scene. It's just more important, right, than in a training situation. So once you feel like you've been rehabilitated, you feel like you're kind of back to that normal state, all right, you get released and you get reassigned. You get to go back out and do your job, all right, but make sure that that's when you're ready. You don't push through something that you're not telling them, or if you don't feel confident to do your job, speak up. All right, so safety begins with you. Take care of yourself, take care of your crew, and take care of the people involved in the incident. All right, so if you're not taking care of yourself, you could ultimately cause a more stressful situation. So make sure you pay attention and don't be too prideful. You must know your own limits. Again, that's before you get to a scene. That's why training is important. Get out there and push it in training with your crew, and that way you can kind of maybe recognize those signs as they happen. All right, so the things we talked about for rehabilitation: describe the need for and function of firefighter rehabilitation. Fire scene activities can cause responders to be exhausted, dehydrated, hungry, ill, injured, or emotionally upset. All right, dehydration. We talked about heat stress and the different forms of it. Follow the rehabilitation guidelines for your department. A rehab station may be needed for incidents other than fire, so thinking about searches, rescues, hazmat incidents, things that maybe we don't get to see as often. All right, so for our review, all right, on page 870, let's just be sure to read over again the purpose of rehabilitation, a few of the items as far as fatigue, and then the concepts behind emergency incident rehabilitation. And on page 871, we need to know about the NFPA standards, all right, who these fall under. So NFPA 1550, Standard of Emergency Responder Health and Safety, and then NFPA 1584, Standard on the Rehabilitation Process for members during emergency operations and training exercises. Okay, on page 873, read through all the dehydration there, just what it is, the effects it can have on the body, what are some of the big don'ts on what and what not to drink. On page 878, read over the field reduction of contaminants. All right, understand why that's important as you move into a rehabilitation area. Move on down, relief from climatic conditions. All right, so just kind of read through it, but understand what the overall goal is to return your body to that normal state, get it back, whether it's to warm it, cool it, but our goal in rehabilitation is to get us back normal and back on the job. So kind of why we were removing some of those conditions. Read back over the different types of heat conditions, so heat rash, heat cramp, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Page 880, 879 into 880, understanding the two different types of cold, hypothermia and frostbite, and some of the signs and symptoms of those. Page 881, understand the difference of passive and active cooling and warming. Also on page 881, under rehydration, read back through just your electrolytes, again, what you should be drinking and not be drinking. On 882, your calorie replacement. All right, so read through your glucose, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Understand a little bit about the differences in those and what they do. All right, that concludes chapter 20. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out and let me know. Thank you.